This week's guest is going to be Dr. Debbie Gale Mitchell. And Debbie, thank you so much for being here. If you could tell us about who you are, what you do, and how you got into content creation.
Sure. Yeah. I have been working as a chemist and a spectroscopist for about 20 years. I'm currently an associate teaching professor at University of Denver. So I do a lot of teaching chemistry classes, primarily undergraduate chemistry classes. And then I also do magnetic resonance spectroscopy. So spectroscopy is just the field of science that studies interaction of light and matter, molecules. And I take it a step further. We use really big magnets to study those molecules. So it's really fun. Yeah, and I just have like a really big passion for making chemistry more accessible for folks, for both my students and just for the general public. And so, yeah, so I've been, interested in how, like, thinking about ways to make chemistry less scary for folks for a long time. And, for a long time, I was over on Twitter, communicating science. And then I'm still over on Twitter. But then, when things got kind of weird a couple of years, I was like, I should branch out. Like, people are on other platforms. So that's when I migrated over. Well, I didn't necessarily migrate. I just also started becoming more active on both Instagram and TikTok. And so I'm also a big reader. And so like I post a lot of like, I kind of got this idea a year ago to talk about, explain the chemistry that I read in books. And sometimes it's science fiction. Sometimes it's romance. Like one of my favorite videos that I've made was talking about Ice Planet Barbarians, because that's a sci-fi romance series. But like the concept of resonance that's heavy in those books is like the foundational concept in spectroscopy. So I was like so excited that was featured so heavily in that series. So it's like it's actually really good science in that series. So it was really fun.
Nice. I love that. First of all, when I was in 10th grade, I took chemistry for the first time, and it was an awful experience. And it put me off chemistry. Like, even as like, I loved bio. I went to college as a biology major, and I just always had like I don't mess with chemistry, like, because of that experience. And so like, I just imagine like seeing somebody who like talked about like chemistry in books and things might have very well shifted like my mindset about it, because now as an adult, I'm like, oh, chemistry is actually really cool. And I kind of wish I had paid a little bit more attention when I was younger.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really common experience for folks. Like, chemistry is a very abstract science. Like, you cannot see it in the way that you can see plants and animals and biology. I mean, obviously some things in biology are quite small, but I think biology, and also on the other side, physics, like people can see the stars and the planets. And so like, I think that there's parts of those fields of science that are quite easy to see. And I think chemistry is challenging because yes, sometimes you can see a chemical reaction happening with a color change or with a gas, being given off. But you have to use theories or models to describe what's happening, right? Like, you can't just easily see those molecules. And that's why I think that there's such a big barrier for folks to learn about chemistry. And it can be, I feel sad that you had that experience, because it's so common. Like, when my students come in to college, a lot of them are very like, they have a lot of trepidation to be in a chemistry class. So you're definitely not alone. And I felt the same way. I mean, I actually really liked my high school chemistry, but I didn't take much high school chemistry. And I was really into math, actually. I like was thinking about majoring in math, but like, we just listened to what our parents say. My dad was like, you should do engineering because that's practical. And like, math is actually really freaking practical, but
yeah.
But I just listened to my dad. So I like literally was like, okay, I'll be an engineer, and chemical engineering sounds cool. So I actually started as a chemical engineer, and then I actually fell in love with the chemistry side of things. And after a couple of years, I started working, actually my freshman year, I started working in a spectroscopy lab, and I loved it so much. So I switched over to the chemistry side of things. But I'd never thought that I would necessarily be working as a chemist, but it's really fun. So anyway, that's long-winded, but I I think that a lot of people relate to what you're talking about. And that's like one of the reasons why I'm trying to make things more less intimidating, I guess.
Yeah. So like what was the like impetus to like move from, because like I think a lot of people have this idea of I want to make whatever science it is that I am passionate about or that I do more accessible, or like they say like they want to invite people who aren't traditionally seen in that field into it, but don't always actually take the leap into like making the content or like doing the thing, you know? What was the thing that like kind of pushed you over into actually like making videos and like putting like, you know, actually putting yourself out there?
Well, that's a really good question. You know, I was really nervous about being on video.
Yeah.
Like, so for a long time, I was avoiding TikTok because I was like, I don't want to film myself. You know?
Yeah.
Um, and so I always gravitated towards the more text-based social media. So Twitter was really nice for me because I could just type something, or sometimes
Hmm.
I'd post a photo. I did a lot of like chemistry makeup looks for a long time, like communicating chemistry with
Ooh,
makeup. I know that was like my thing on Twitter, but I don't really do that anymore.
that sounds so
Because
cool. I'm gonna put a pin in it.
yeah, maybe I'll do another one of those at some point. But yeah. Um, but yeah, so I was like just really feeling this like, okay, if people are not going to be on Twitter anymore, I still want to connect with people. And like my husband was super into TikTok, like he like
Okay.
loves TikTok. And he was kind of like encouraging me. He was like, "You'd be really good at this. You should make some TikTok videos. Like just go ahead and try it." And then he would also send me ideas. He's like, "See this one? You could make something like this." Like so he was kind of like encouraging me. And so I was like, "Okay, fine." So I mean, and my first videos are a little bit rough. I got a lot better at editing videos and things like that. But I think it took just a little bit of encouragement. And also when I started making TikTok videos, I was so scared to put like my face on it. Just
Yeah.
because like just knowing how it has been on Twitter, anytime I put my face on social media, it comes with like a lot of all sorts of comments, you know?
Hmm.
And so I was just like nervous about it, just putting myself out there. So most of my first TikTok videos were more just like videos of chemical reactions or um showing a color change in a reaction or different things rather than like me talking about something. So it took me about a year of just making like not
Yeah.
me videos. And then I was like, once I got the idea for making the chemistry and books videos, I was like, okay, this is something I'm excited to talk about. Probably nobody else will be interested in this, but I like them. And so it was something that I wanted to do. So I think it just took, I don't, so that's kind of a long winded answer. I'm so sorry for
Oh no, no, no,
just
you're great.
rambling a bit, but yeah, so it was a lot of encouragement from my TikTok loving husband. And then also just slowly finding something that I was excited about making, I guess. Yeah. So
I think like listening to that, like there are like three things that stood out to me. Like one, like your husband's encouragement, because I think it's really underestimated how important community is in like the content creation thing, because it seems it's a very individual thing because it's you and a camera and you're feels like you're talking to no one. But like having those people who are like telling you like you actually like there's something here or like you should really do it does matter so much. In the early days, I think even just like throughout, like, how do you still feel like that is important to your, like, maybe that might be a personal experience of mine, but like, I feel like even being a year in to like putting my face on a camera and everything, like having people who are still encouraging me still feels important. Is that your experience as well?
absolutely. Like it's really encouraging to know that people like are actually interested in the videos that you're
Mm,
making. And then also, yeah, my husband's like super supportive. He'll be like, "Oh, I really like this one thing that you said in the video today." And I'm like, "Oh,
yeah.
thanks." And like you know, I only have the bandwidth to make about one video a week. Like that's
Hmm.
just like I work full time. I have two kids. Like I just don't have, I'm really impressed by content creators that can do more than that. So it can be a little nerve wracking. It's like you spend a couple hours on that one video for the week, and it's like, was that a waste or not? But
Yeah.
but just you're saying people around you that appreciate it or are encouraging, it really means a lot. Like, and just really quickly, one quick experience was I just went to one of my good friends. She's a romance author, and she just had her first traditionally published book. And I
So
just went to
cool.
her. I just went to her like book launch, I guess, at the Ripped Bodice in New York City, and it was fun because I met a couple like they're mainly bookstagrammers that were
Hmm.
there, and this woman comes up to me and she was like, "I am so excited you're here." She was like, my husband's a chemist and she's like a big romance reader, and I've done a lot of like chemistry and romance novel
Yeah.
videos. And she's like, I've shown all of your videos to my husband and he's like so interested that there's like
It's
chemistry in these
so
books.
cool.
So like stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't happen like super often, but just like there are people out there that like really appreciate the work like that you're doing to create science content, even if it's only once a week or very niche.
Hmm.
There are people that appreciate it, I guess. So yes, the community is super important.
Yeah, and like I'm thinking about too, um, like how you were like you started off with like you weren't comfortable with the face video, so you just like it's like finding something you feel comfortable with and just doing it consistently. And yeah, like everybody when you start your edit, like it sucks, it just does. And I look back at some of my old ones and I'm like, oh my God. And then someone like a little bit after that where I like was like, I'm getting better. And today I'm like, oh, but it's just like kind of part of the process. And then I think too, from what you talked about, is like finding that thing that you really, really enjoy, even if you don't think anybody else will enjoy it, and putting it out there. I is like my personal vibe. Like it's like that's how you find your magic. That's how you find your secret sauce because there is always somebody who is weird in the same way you're weird. Because
Exactly.
yeah, I don't think of weird as being a bad thing, and so I'm like just like lean into your weird as hard as you can. And I think that's kind of like where you start to find your people.
Totally. And can I just give you a compliment really quickly? Like the way that you use like pop culture or just like different like relevant current events to explain like topics in biology is like so effective.
Oh,
And I'm
thank you.
always every time I watch one of your videos, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I would have never connected these two things together before. So I think that that's true of your channel. And yeah, so
Thank you.
it's really cool to see like people that are nerdy in different ways and are able to make these connections that nobody else would make
Yeah.
probably. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and one of the reasons why I am just like I'm like just make the content, post the content, um, because like there are connections that like you see, but we all see certain connections because of our lived experiences, like my perspectives and the things that I've seen and experienced and everything, and then just like my brain chemistry. Because like the ADHDs, and I think a lot of the ways that I end up seeing something and making connections is just like the hyper focus and like the way I'll just jump from thing to thing to thing and then like, oh, there's a line and nobody else sees the line until I but then it's clarifying. And so I'm sure there are hundreds, thousands of people who can do the same thing. It's just having like being knowing the content and then putting yourself online.
Yeah.
So like sort of on that note, like when you get started with content creation and when you're doing it, what are the parts of it that like are like the hardest to do and what's like some of the most fun things to do?
Hardest, I would say, I actually research a tremendous amount before I put anything out on, like if I'm making a chemist, like if I'm talking about the chemistry, for example, I did a video on Courtney Milan's The Mark West Who Mustn't, and it was about um, carbolic acid, which is also called phenol, and how that was used as a antiseptic. And like, I vaguely knew about it, but it was like I wanted to really know my shit. So even though it's like a
Yes.
few minute video, like I probably spent a couple of hours doing research for that video, just to make sure I just am. The other thing that I'm really, really passionate about, I guess, is information literacy and science literacy and like helping my students be able to evaluate sources and evaluate information. So I take that very seriously. So I would say the hardest part is I want to make sure anything that I'm creating is correct
Mm-hmm.
and also accessible, which is actually pretty challenging because when you're
Yeah.
simplifying things, it's like, how much can I simplify this without getting too far away from being accurate? So I would say that anxiety around just making sure I really know the content before I share it, even though I have a PhD in chemistry, even though I've been working as a chemist for 20 years, like I just have to make sure it's clear. The most fun part, I would say, is when is the interactions with folks. I think, like, especially when someone is really excited about the content, or they make a really interesting connection that I haven't thought about before. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, last Halloween, I posted a video all about how to do elephant toothpaste with your kids. If you had a Sally's Beauty Supply, you can get basically all the materials from Sally's Beauty Supply. So I was talking about
Yeah.
how, just developers like hydrogen peroxide, and you need soap, and then you need a catalyst, which you can use yeast. And this woman, who I think she identified as a hairstylist, I can't remember, but she comments on there. She's like, "So you're telling me the soap cap is one ingredient away from elephant toothpaste?" And I had never, even though, like, my best friend is a hairstylist, obviously I have like a million different colored hair all the time. My best friend
Which,
is a hairstylist. I've done my own soap caps before, with her advice and guidance. Like, even though I had done my own soap caps before, I had never made that connection
mm-hmm.
that was like one step away from elephant toothpaste. Like, I just add a catalyst, and then
Yeah.
like, you now have a situation on your hands. So it was just like really fun to be able to be like, oh my gosh, like, they're making connections that I haven't even thought of,
Yeah.
like, with chemistry. And so, like, that's the most fun part. So, like, yes, the research is like challenging and it takes time. And that's, again, why I only have time to make like one video a week,
Yeah.
maybe. Sometimes it's every couple of weeks. But yeah, seeing other people, connect those dots and make those connections is like really, really cool.
Yeah, which, by the way, that was one of my first thoughts when we logged on, was like how much I love your hair color. So I should have said that then. Um, but also, like, I love that so much, because one of, like, the things that I'm really about is help people to see, like, just science in the day to day. I don't know if that comes from being a teacher and like trying to help my students see it or what, but um I just am like, also, like, there's way more science in our day-to-day life than I think most people realize, and most people are doing, like, actively engaging in science way more often than they realize. And so examples like that are just things that I love, and I don't think they really do only come to the surface often when we're having conversations, or like when you're able to access like content about science that you don't necessarily understand deeply at the moment, but then, like, by seeing that and having those conversations, then you can connect it to something in your own life. And then now we have these like these just greater uh, depths of examples of, like, science being way more ubiquitous than people tend to think it is.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really cool things about TikTok as a platform. Like, I follow like some biologists like you, and I follow some, physicists and some mathematicians, and it's like, just you kind of alluded to this earlier, but like, each of these different people, like, they have this, they see the world differently
Mm-hmm.
because of that expertise. Like, you moving through the world as a biologist, you're noticing these things that I don't notice. And then, someone who's a physicist is noticing things that
Yeah.
someone else might notice. Like, so we just kind of have this lens, I guess, that allows us to see things differently. And it's really cool. It's exciting to have those conversations and to see content creators like you talking about these connections, because then it's like, it opens a world for
Mm-hmm.
me, and for other people that they probably wouldn't have realized otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we've talked about the romance books and just books in general and connecting it to chemistry. And I am absolutely, when we get off, gonna, like, go to your Twitter and, like, look for these makeup chemistry books, because I am so intrigued. But in general, like, what are some of your favorite things to, like, talk about in your content?
Yeah. So I love talking about spectroscopy and color. So I taught a chemistry and art class for 4 years at DU. So helping people understand why certain things are colorful or give off different colors. I'm actually writing an entire book on the field of
Very
spectroscopy.
cool.
Yeah, I sold the proposal to MIT Press back in March, so it won't be out for a long time, but I'm working on it.
It's
but
still exciting.
so yeah, anything related to color is like my absolute favorite thing to talk about, or light in general, because that's basically what made me fall in love with the field of chemistry, was just this idea that, you know, I could understand how molecules were either absorbing or reflecting or scattering light to
Mhm.
create color, or to create something like a mirror, or to create, all of these like really beautiful phenomena that we see in the world around us. So anything related to light and color is like my absolute favorite thing. I also am very passionate about sustainability, and I also do a lot of work in environmental chemistry. So a lot of the spectroscopy work that I do is for analyzing the air that we breathe, and the water that we drink. And so, um, my most popular video that I've made to this point, it was actually on tropospheric ozone. I can't believe how many people watched that video. I was like shocked. There's another one of those videos. I was like, I'm just going to make a video real quick,
Mhm.
and there were a couple things that I was like, oh, I should have said that slightly differently. Like that was one that I didn't really like spend all the time on, because like it was something I know a lot about. So I was like, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
talk about this real quick. And then like a 500,000 people watched it. And I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know what language I
You're
shouldn't.
good. You're fine.
Okay. But so yeah, so things related to the environment. One of the classes I teach at DU is environmental chemistry. So
Okay.
anything around air quality and water quality, and specifically how we use spectroscopy to analyze the air. So we're using light to analyze the air that we're breathing and the water that we're drinking. Those are like the topics that I'm the most passionate about. But I do love to do the, talking about science and in the fun stuff too, like explaining. One of the videos that I really enjoyed making was, I don't know if you've ever read Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn, but it's a really cool magical system where all of the metals give the people different powers. So like if they
Ooh.
ingest like iron versus steel versus pewter, like it gives them different powers. And so I made a video kind of saying like, does this make sense? Do these powers make sense based on the power of metals?
I love that.
That was a really fun one. I really enjoyed that. So I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah, anything
Yeah.
about light, color, the environment, those are the things I like am excited the most to talk about.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool. And also that sounds like a really cool premise for this book that I apparently need to go and get. Um
I mean, I'm a Brandon Sanderson fan, but I know high fantasy is not everybody's like cup of
I'm a
tea. So
fantasy girl.
okay.
I yeah. I don't know if you've seen like the random crown that I will wear. It's like I
Oh,
like to sit and be like, yes, I'm a fairy queen,
I
and
love
you know,
that.
so sometimes I just put on a crown to talk about science on the internet.
As you should, because you
Yeah.
are a queen, so you
Yes,
should wear
I
that crown.
I like to say I'm like slinging science in a crown. Like it's a vibe. So if like somebody was talking to you and they're like they are in science, this is their field, and they are thinking about getting into content creation or they want to do science communication, and like, well, I don't really know where to start. What's some advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I think that it's okay for people to, um, if they're interested in content creation. I think one thing that I would probably have them think about first is like what type of content they're thinking about
Mm-hmm.
making. Because if you're somebody who, I think there are some people that feel more comfortable on a platform, like that's how I was for many years, like Twitter, but because Twitter's is so fractured right now. Some people are on Blue Sky, some people are on
Yeah.
on Threads. I do think TikTok has been the easiest to like actually get to people outside of your own circle.
Hmm.
At least compared to Instagram. Like Instagram, I maybe I just don't understand the algorithm, but
I don't think anyone does.
I Instagram, people outside of like the 1,000 people that are following me don't really see the stuff I make on Instagram. Whereas like
Hmm.
TikTok, like that ozone video, I think they showed it to every single person in Denver. Coworkers coming up to me saying, "Oh, my daughter saw you on TikTok." I was like, "Oh,
Isn't it such a weird feeling?
okay."
Sorry, I'm completely derailed. But
Yeah, no, it is a weird feeling. I haven't had a moment like that since I had a makeup look go viral back in 2017, and it was so weird.
yeah.
And I'm like, so yeah, so Twitter used to be the place because it was like, the way
Hmm.
Twitter is, the way people retweet it, it can get outside of your circle. And I still think that Twitter is really, really good for networking with other scientists. Also, probably Blue Sky. I know a lot of scientists don't want to be associated with Twitter and are over on Blue Sky. But I would say like okay, to go back to your question, I'm so sorry, Jordan.
Look, I am the queen of meandering, so you are not bothering me.
Thank you. You're so patient and kind. I appreciate it. So like to go back to your question, like if someone's interested in being on socials, I would say first think about like what information are you trying to get out to the general public? Like, and I think it's okay if it's relatively focused and it's something that you're interested
Hmm.
in and you're passionate about. And then two, think about like what type of social is going to be the best for the type of content that you're creating. And I do think that video is a barrier for a lot of folks for TikTok specifically, but I know I just really appreciate that you're trying to encourage folks to do this work because I do think it's a lot easier to actually reach the general public on TikTok than some of these other platforms. But if you're someone who, really just only wants to share photos or images, like maybe Instagram's the place where you want to be, or maybe Twitter, or maybe Blue Sky. So yeah, so I would just think about like what type of content you're thinking about creating, what type of and then once you're on one of these social media platforms, like maybe it's Twitter, maybe it's TikTok, like look at the people that are really successful, that you admire, that are doing really good work. I mean, for me, obviously Andre Isaacs was like someone who really inspires me, but he does like a lot of things that I could never do. I can't dance. So and I shouldn't say that. Like I'm always telling my students to have a growth mindset. But like I just knew for me, I wasn't going to be dancing on TikTok. Like
Hmm.
that was a bridge too far for
Yeah.
me. Like so but there are other types of content that you can create, and so like looking at what other people are doing and thinking about what can I contribute, what can be of value to folks that can help get the type of science communication out that I want to get out, basically.
Yeah.
So but yeah, but I also think that like having, just like you were saying earlier, if you're thinking about getting onto socials, having that community that you can bounce ideas off of or even make videos with, like
Hmm.
one of my one of my very good friends, Sarah Zingalis, she and I have made a few TikTok videos together, and she's a chemistry professor in Connecticut. And so just like having that support of like, we don't know what we're doing, but we're gonna
Yeah.
try that. It might be weird, but whatever. It's like at least we're doing it together,
Yeah.
So like having that type of community and support. So like maybe find another person who's also like veering into this space that you can kind of like bounce off ideas off of, or even collaborate to make videos
Hmm.
together or something like that.
Yeah, I love that answer because, like, I've dabbled with lives a couple times, and lives still horrify me. And which I think is kind of funny because I don't shut up. Um, so it seems like I would be good at it, but it's always a lot easier when I go live with somebody else. Um, and then like you said, like the finding what you're excited to create about is so important, because I think a lot of times we have these ideas of like what it has to be. And when you get in that box, it makes it feel even more unsurmountable. And then it's like when you kind of take away the boundaries of what you think it must be and kind of do just like what you want to do, it gets a little bit easier. Like finding chemistry in romance books, because I can't imagine that was something that you like scrolling and found somebody else doing, and we're like, oh, okay, it's like this is something that I think is cool and that I think about and I just want to share.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Just find, yeah, because if you're not having fun, I mean, or if you're not like enjoying yourself, then it's going to be a lot more difficult to make
Yes.
any type of content, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, because like I said, like some of the stuff I post takes a lot of research, like
Mm-hmm.
obviously behind the scenes, and you don't see that. But like because I'm excited to be like, oh no, I actually really want to tell you about the vampires and vampires of El Norte and why they're
Yeah.
killed by the salt. Let me tell you about that. Like then it makes it more fun to like go ahead
Yeah.
and make that video. But yeah, I mean, and I also think it's, you know, it's okay to I think people are scared of, me and myself included, of making something and just going into the ether and no one cares and
Mm-hmm.
nobody, and that's just like part of the process, I guess. Like, but if you're excited about it and you're interested in it, like I think that it still has value, because you know, even if no one watches a video that I make, sometimes it gives me ideas for how I can present
Mm-hmm.
things in class, or you know, different things. So like the time is not lost, the time is not wasted, it's still good, I guess, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yes, yes. And actually, like, I almost feel like in the beginning, the possibility that it can just kind of go out into the ether and nobody else see it is almost comforting. Because it's
That's
like, if this is a hot mess, at least nobody really saw it.
right.
And then, like, and to your point, like, I feel like the videos that I'm always like, nobody, like, this is not going to get past 200 views. I am being very silly, and this is for nobody but me.
That's pops up.
Always. Always.
Seriously, I know it's. I mean, that's the truth on every social media platform.
Yeah.
That's my experience, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what?
Yeah. It's like if I thought somebody would have actually seen this, I might have done it a little bit differently.
Yep. It's the curse of socials, I guess, but
Yeah.
it's okay. It's part of the process. I just look at it as, you know, if you have a viral thing and it maybe isn't exactly perfect or what you wanted, hopefully that invites that person in to go see something that you did spend the 4 hours researching. You
Yeah.
know?
Yep. And it's like when you have like that, like a post that like hits like that, that just like goes well and beyond anything you could have imagined. How do you like? So like, I don't think I've ever had 500,000 on anything. But like, I remember the very first time I had a post that like hit 25K, and I was just like paralyzed. Like, what do you mean? So like, how do you like? Do you get that feeling? And if you do, then like, how do you like push yourself to like make the next post?
Yeah, that's, you know, I think I have a little bit of experience just because of my experience on Twitter. So the tweet that went, I had that makeup tweet that went viral back in 2017. I think it had something like 2 million. I mean, it was a lot. It was like,
Yeah.
it was, it, and it was awful. It was good because people were so excited to see like women in chemistry who were like super into makeup, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why it was like popular. Um, but it came with a lot of like harassment
Yeah.
and a lot of, I had to block a lot of people for inappropriate comments.
Yeah. I can imagine that the women in chemistry, like you get a lot of positive, but also you get a lot of the very opposite.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, I'm like, fortunately or unfortunately, I've been a woman on the internet for a minute. I joined Twitter in 2013 or 2014. And so, I think that like I've actually been shocked at how much better TikTok has been compared to Twitter in terms of like there hasn't been a ton of even on Instagram. It gets weird really quickly. Like
Yes.
post things to your stories and all of a sudden you get
Yes.
these weird DMs and you're like, what's happening here?
It is really weird because I definitely had that fear going into TikTok of like I thought it was gonna be like Twitter's comment section.
Mm-hmm.
Um and because Twitter can it can leave your little circle so fast
Yep.
and get
Yep.
to people with like the exact opposite ideology so quickly. And you just are
Yeah.
all of a sudden like, all right, I gotta lock everything down.
Yeah.
And it
So
happens so fast. But TikTok, I haven't, it like you get it happens now and then, but like I've had the same experience, like TikTok being mostly like good
support.
actor, yeah,
Yeah.
supportive, and Instagram does get real weird too.
I've been like pleasantly surprised by TikTok, but I would just say in general, like anytime I talk to people about socials, is like just don't be afraid to block people. Don't be afraid
Hmm.
to do that because you have to keep yourself safe and so like Twitter, I block people the moment someone saying something gross or inappropriate, I block them. And the other thing that I do a lot on, and I haven't actually, I don't mean to like talk about like how to do things on TikTok on here, but like I also mute things really quickly, easily if something is like making
Mm,
the rounds really quickly, and especially if I know it's like not good actors, like you were saying,
yes.
like I posted a tweet last fall. I'm disabled, so I'm very COVID conscious, and so like I masked basically all of last year teaching, and I posted a tweet back in the fall about like, hey, I'm first day of class, I'm wearing my
Hmm.
N95 mask, just like I didn't even think anybody was going to see it. Like you said, that's when things pop off. But that went to the like
Yeah.
side Twitter that was like, this person is like, I was getting death threats over me masking in a chemistry classroom. I was like, be for real. Are you
Yes.
guys serious?
Yes.
Like,
It's
so I just like muted it. Anytime things were coming up, I was just like block, 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 block. You know, like
hmm.
so like I would just say like you have to just set boundaries on socials. And but luckily like when I had that ozone video that went really made the rounds, apparently mainly in Denver. It's like just from the comments, everybody like lived in Denver. Um, it was a lot better. Like I got a few comments of like, you don't know what you're talking about, but it really wasn't that. It wasn't that nothing. It was nothing like I had experienced
Yeah.
on Twitter. So I was like, this is great. But I don't know, TikTok, I think the culture is different. Like I do feel compelled to like respond to comments on TikTok, like because I feel like people are so like
Hmm.
uh, responsive. And so that was tricky because I was like, I actually don't have time to respond to all of these. So, I guess like in terms of handling a moment like that, just to the TLDR is like one block is the minute you feel unsafe or something's inappropriate, just block. Like
Hmm.
there's no need to like be messing around with that. And then two, like, oh, the other thing is like never have notifications on for any of your socials on your
Yes.
like don't turn those off. you
Yes.
don't you don't need to know. You don't need to know. So I don't have any notifications on. So then I like if I'll go on to TikTok at a
Hmm.
designated time and like try to and just go to only the comments and try to answer the comments when I can, but you're not gonna be able to hit everything. But luckily I
Yeah.
haven't posted anything in a minute, so it's quiet again now. So it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, no, that's very real. Like I kind of like set in my mind of like, if a video is posted, it has like I'll respond to comments like for a certain amount of time that day, the next day, and the day after that, and then it's done. And if
Yep.
you come after that, I'm so sorry. because I work a full-time job
Yeah.
and I did
Yeah.
this, and so like I simply cannot. But I also think people on TikTok generally understand that like if you're there pretty early, you'll probably get commented. Like you'll probably get a response. And if you're not, you probably won't.
Yeah, yeah, right. No, and I don't ever expect people to, just like you said, I do think people are very understanding. I just feel like if people are asking me a chemistry question, I'm like, I should
Yeah.
probably respond.
Yeah,
But
it
yeah,
does.
just like you said, it's you have to protect your time. Like socials are not like this is something that people are doing as a hobby or for fun, typically if you're like me. And I've been on socials for more than 10 years and I've never made any money off of anything. This is something
Yeah.
I'm doing because I care about it.
So when you think about like what you do on social media and like the content you do for science communication, what do you think about like doing in the future within that realm?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, I think that, in the future, I would love to make a lot more content specifically around environmental chemistry. It seems like people are really interested in it, just based on that one video that I made. But I want it to be, I don't know, I've had different ideas. I've thought it'd be cool to have people who aren't feeling as confident about making a TikTok, like helping them make one, someone
Mm-hmm.
like, because I know multiple people who are like experts in environmental chemistry. Could I interview somebody or could I, um, videotape them talking about it and posting it to my
Yeah.
page? Or would that be weird? Or, just thinking about different things like that. But definitely where my heart has been at lately is, we're dealing with a lot of wildfires right now in Colorado. And I mean, this has been going on for a long time. We've been consistently having a wildfire season for the last 5 years. And so, just helping people understand where those air quality alerts are coming from, breaking that down, helping them understand where that information is coming from, how it's
Mm-hmm.
measured. Like that's the type of information I'd really like to make. And it's not quite as like fun as like the book stuff, but it's like really important. And so I'm kind of thinking about, how can I make this not so stressful, but interesting and helpful for folks. I don't know, but that's kind of
Yeah.
what I've been thinking about. What
I
about
think.
you? What are you thinking?
Oh, so I'm going to answer your question,
Okay,
but I do
sorry.
want to say, that I think that the air quality thing would be, I think that like people will really be interested in that because I know like this when I get the air quality alerts on my phone. I'm in Georgia, but I like my allergies. I can usually kind of tell before I even get the alert or happen to see the alert because I'm like I'm already a mess and I haven't even looked at outside yet. And like this summer, I felt like I wasn't outside the way I wanted to be outside because of how many air quality alerts there were. And so I
Huh.
definitely would be interested in understanding more about like what that means. Like I looked it up and I feel like I have a very surface level understanding and probably more of an understanding than like a layperson just because of the science content knowledge that I have. But I definitely don't have like a thorough understanding of what's going on. But for me, I have so many ideas. It's a problem. I have like some things that I want to explore, but they aren't things that I necessarily know backwards and for like it's that are kind of outside of the curriculum that I teach. Because most of the things that I've talked about so far are things that like I also kind of talk about in my classroom, so I know them backwards and forwards. Um, but there are other things like I get a lot of requests to talk about epigenetics, and I'm just like, I would love to, and also I have to have the time to go and actually make sure I have a good enough understanding to get on the internet and talk about this. um, Especially to talk about it in the way that I prefer to talk about science. Like I don't want to come at it with a bunch of like in kind of sciences, and so like I have some things like that I want to do. I really enjoy the talking about evolution and how it's not actually a mechanism to make things quote unquote better. It is just a mechanism to like we're not even to do anything. It's a mechanism that results in the ones that survive reproducing. That it's just what happens. And so, and I like thinking about that too, because I am I think my big thing is thinking about like, how do we rehumanize science? Because a lot of the ways that I think we're taught it, kind of like, it's looking at it from a very abstract overview. And I think that's why it feels really foreign to a lot of people, because it's not kind of embedded in our like human experiences. So I think about it that way. And then I want to do things to help other people do science content creation, because I'm just like, look, I know a little bit of biology and I would like to know a lot about other things. And if all you lovely people get on the internet and talk about it, I can learn it.
Love that you're doing that work. I mean, I think it's so cool that you're trying to encourage folks to do this, because like that's what you're doing, is you're building that community that some of these people may not have, and that's really cool. Also, I just think that like the videos that I've seen, one of the videos that I've seen of yours, where you were you started it off of like talking about how, instead of including these dusty old white men in the curriculum, I like that kind of stuff is actually like so important, because like just like you're saying, like when people can see themselves
Mm-hmm.
in the field or in science in general, then they're going to be able to connect to it better. So you are definitely doing the work, which I really appreciate.
Thank you.
One of the examples that I use a lot is I hope I'm not mispronouncing her name, but Yao Yao Tu. She's a Chinese chemist, and she won the Nobel Prize, I think, in 2016. And she won the Nobel Prize because she basically took like all of these different herbal remedies for malaria that were used historically in Chinese herbal medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And she figured out, okay, this particular plant is actually curing malaria. Why is it doing that? So she isolated the active molecule that was actually doing the work, healing
Yeah.
people from malaria. And then she went on and figured out a synthetic route to produce it, in a chemistry lab. And then, like, yeah, ended up saving millions of people's lives. And, she's like somebody I love to talk about, because in my chemistry classes, well, one, she's not a dusty old white man. Just this idea of like, so much of our medicine comes from the biological world, plants specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more than 50% of our medicines are natural products. And I think so often people are trying to pit, natural medicine against
Yes.
like Western medicine. And I don't always understand that, because I'm like, you guys know that we get a lot of Western medicine from plants, like chemists aren't pitting these against one another. We're like actively looking at plants and figuring out, how do we mimic
Mm-hmm.
the molecular synthetic mechanisms, so uh, so yeah, I just think that it's like really important to sort of like demystify like what a chemist is actually doing, what a biologist is actually doing, and also using these relevant examples that are happening now, and not just, oh, let's rehash again.
Mm-hmm.
Also, not only are they dusty old white men, but like I just learned that Newton like was invested in the trans transatlantic
Yeah,
slave.
it's way more common in a lot of the like the scientists that come up in like the history of science that we get taught. It's way more common for them to have been involved in slave trade, or like just like actively involved in oppression of other people, than it's ever talked about, which is my other like big gripe with
Right.
it all.
Yeah,
Which
totally.
I could go on a
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean that.
but
I know, I'm like, I'm going off on it. I just have been, I've been working on this book about spectroscopy, and like I am doing a lot of research into history for different things, and it's like it's frustrating to me, because it's like, it's like these myths in the history of science just get
mm-hmm.
perpetuated over and over and over again. But then it's like also really difficult when you're just a chemist, like I'm not a trained historian, to like go in and be like, oh, how do I research what people in the global south were doing, when one, I don't speak these
Yeah.
languages, and two, so it's like really challenging. I'm on a tangent, I'm so sorry, but
No, because I'm about to join you. Um, because like in like an ideal world where I have been very, very lucky, I would love to like be involved with a show of some kind where it is like scientists and historians like working together to kind of to flesh out the history of science, like a more complete global history of science. Because like even the chemist we were just talking about that won the Nobel Prize, the plant being discovered to cure malaria, like it sounds like, I don't have the context of this, so if this is wrong, tell me I'm wrong. But it sounds like this is a plant that was known like within Chinese culture to cure this disease, which means that on some communal level, at a community level, some science was done to understand that this plant cured this disease. And they had like, there were trials like and it wasn't necessarily recorded and presented in a way that matches what we think of as science, but it was science. And it's like thinking about like those things. That's my jam. And I would love to like be like, I would love to see like a TV show based off of that, like some like books, like that is like in my big dream of like 10 years from now, like a National Geographic show type deal of like going around the world with historians and anthropologists and actual inside of local communities, having those conversations and like connecting that to like, this is science.
Yes, totally. Like the amount of indigenous knowledge that just doesn't get the credit that it deserves, you know, is really frustrating. Like I'm writing a chapter on fluorescence right now. And one of the things that I learned, as far as I know, and again, I'm not a historian, so like this is just based on the research that I've done. As far as I know, the first people that ever did analytical fluorescence to detect whether or not a material was what they thought it was, were like people living in Mexico before colonizers arrived, you know, like, and so it's like frustrating to me because people will be like, oh, this person discovered fluorescence in Europe and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, not really.
Yeah.
So it's like, that type of show going through that type of really, really cool. But also I think it would be really, really challenging because of the way some of the history in our world has unfolded. Like it's not going to be an easy task, I guess.
No. Like that is like one of the things that if I had more time in a day, I would spend my time just like going through histories and like thinking about it in connection with science. I would like to make content like that. And just like generally talking about how science has been kind of like misused. I've done a little bit of it, but how it's like been misused, and why we see that mistrust in science. Because people are wary for a reason in a lot of cases. And which I'm about to stop talking in a second because I've fully lost the plot. But
I'm so sorry. I started talking about Yaya too, and then I was like, what?
it's fine. But yeah, I think that is something that like as science communicators that we do have to take into account, particularly people who do science communication that is trying to combat misinformation.
Yes.
Is like you do have to take into account that for a lot of populations, their mistrust in science is earned.
Yes.
And so if you want to do the work of correcting misinformation, you have to address that first.
You have to build that trust. Like you have to have, a community has to have trust in you, and not just me specifically, but in you know,
like the institution.
Exactly. And we haven't done a good job building that trust. So, you know, it's like, it's understandable sometimes why people are, you know, weary, probably saying that wrong, wary of certain things. But I guess I would say that, like, to connect it back to your question earlier, is that it sounds like for the future of content that you and I are both interested in creating, I think that sounds like we're both interested in creating content around like what type of, history of science maybe has been overlooked or missed that is relevant for folks that might help them feel more connected with the discipline. One book that I read that was written by, I think her name is Anicia Ramirez. I hope I get so nervous about mispronouncing names, but she wrote a book called The Alchemy of Us. And one of the chemists I learned about that I had never known about in there were two chemists that worked at Polaroid. And I wish I knew the names off of the top of my head. I'm going to look it up really quickly because I wrote it down. Yeah, she wrote about these two chemists, Ken Williams and Carolyn Hunter. They were chemists at Polaroid, and they led a boycott of Polaroid's involvement in the apartheid in South Africa, and that led to like some really important change. So like
cool.
also this myth of just like, you're talking about humanizing science. I think there's also this myth that like scientists are not part of the global community and care about these things and like want to make a difference. And I think that like I'm always looking for ways that I can help or make a small contribution while still sort of like staying in what I'm an expert in. I don't know if that makes sense, but you know what I mean? Like, because I'm always so hesitant, because talking about misinformation and that type of thing, I'm always so hesitant to speak on things that I don't fully grasp or fully understand. And so, like being able to talk about scientists who were able to speak on these things that did have a full understanding and grasp, like the context of, a global event like that, I think is important. But anyway, this is what this book looks like. It's pretty good.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah.
Yes.
I read a lot. So if you ever need book recommendations, I'm your I read like 2 books a week. So
actually, as we come towards the end, that is the question of let's say a one more book recommendation and a music recommendation.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Whew. I should have been prepared for this.
It's my bad.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Okay. I'm like put on the spot. Okay, book, but you can edit some of this out, right?
Yes.
Give me 1 second. Do you want like a nonfiction rec or a fiction rec, or
let's do one of each?
One of each. Okay. Let me. Okay. Actually, I know. I already know. Nonfiction rec. I think the most important narrative nonfiction science book is Braiding Sweetgrass for me.
Yes.
It's such an important book. If you haven't read it yet, you should. Like I've read it twice, and I just think that like, it was written 10 years ago, but just this concept of one, the importance of indigenous knowledge and Western knowledge and how they can work together to advance science forward, which is kind of what we were touching on earlier. And two, just this concept of living in a reciprocal nature with the world is something that I think about like seriously every single day. So if you haven't read Braiding Sweetgrass, I know it's a very popular book, but it's popular because it's important and also got some of the most beautiful prose I've ever read. So okay. For fiction, this is going to be hard because I read a lot. Let's see. This is so hard. I'm so sorry. Hold on 1 second. I'm just trying to. It's like figuring out what book would be. I may just recommend an author in general.
That works.
Yeah. Okay. One of my favorite authors of all time, her name is Courtney Milan. She writes primarily historical romance. One of the books that I read recently that has just really stuck with me is her book called Unclaimed. And but really any book by her, you can't go wrong. She's like she writes like incredibly like feminist historical romance. And she also, some of her earlier books, most of her books are set in England. Her earlier books are primarily white protagonists, but Courtney Milan herself, is biracial. So her later books, she has, incorporated like a lot of, the actual racial makeup that you would see in
Mm-hmm.
London. Like there were a lot of Asian people living there, a lot of South Asian people, Black people. So anyway, she wrote this book called Unclaimed, just really quickly. And basically the premise of the book is there's this guy who has been knighted by the queen because he wrote a book on chastity. And it's like this really important book. And but it's actually like he wrote a book on chastity in a cool way, not in like a controlling women way, in like a way that he is talking about the importance that men have to not harm women with sex, essentially. So like, because the consequences of sex often fall on the women. So this
Mm-hmm.
is taking place in Victorian England. So he like wrote this book of like why it's important for men to be celibate, basically.
Okay.
So it's like he's being voluntary celibate, but then the problem is like all of the involuntary celibate men take basically create this cult around him that they are like, and they completely miss the point of his book.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about like denigrating women, and it's just crazy to me that this book was Courtney Milan wrote this book like way before incels were like really talked about on the internet. So it's just like such a timely book. And then of course he falls in love with a sex worker because of course. So he's like this voluntary celibate man.
I am very intrigued because I used to read historical romance before grad school broke me.
That's valid. Just say valid.
And I haven't read in a while, but it is all like this is very different from what I remember it being, and so I am very intrigued.
Yeah, Courtney Milan is chef's kiss. She also has a master's degree in chemistry, so I'm like, and
Yeah.
she also clerked for the Supreme Court, so she like has just an incredible wealth of knowledge in like multiple areas
Yeah.
of the world. So that's her Turner series, the one that I mentioned, Unclaimed. That's like one of her older series. It came out like more than 10 years ago, I think 2012.
Okay.
Her newest series is called The Wedgeford Trials, and it's all Asian protagonists, and it's super cute. Like that series is a lot more lighthearted.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, either her new stuff or her old stuff, you like can't really go wrong. Her older stuff is kind of a little bit on the heavier side. Like that book is like a little bit on the heavier side, I would say,
Yeah.
but so good. Like the whole time I was reading it, I was like, I can't believe she wrote this like 12 years ago.
No, like I'm definitely sitting here like, I gotta read this book. Which honestly, I'm leaving this conversation with like a laundry list of books to go and
I love it.
never apologize for recommending a good book.
Yeah, I don't watch a ton of TV, not because I just don't have the attention span for like TV. I don't know what it is about reading. Like I can sit down and read, but like I can't like just sit and like watch a show.
I understand that. I'm that way about movies. Like I can't sit and watch a movie, but I can watch seasons of a television show for some reason. I can't explain it. But it is what it is. And I can sit and read like a trilogy in a sitting.
Yes, that's how
And so it's nonsense because I can't sit and watch a 2-hour movie, but I can spend hours and hours.
That's exactly how I am. I can read. Yeah. Yeah. Courtney Milan, my other favorite author, I know you just said one is Sherry Thomas. Her Lady Sherlock series is like, chef's kiss. Like if you like mystery,
yeah,
it's like a historical. It's like it's if basically Sherlock was a woman. Her name's Charlotte Holmes, and she like purposefully. I made a video about the first book in the series, but she's on the marriage mart basically, and she doesn't want to get married, so she like purposefully gets caught like having sex with this guy, and then like she's ruined, right? So then she gets to go be a ruined woman and live on her own, but then she's like actually really bad news for her. But then she gets some help from Mrs. Watson, and they start a business together, and it's really good. Yeah. So highly recommend that series too. And that's another one that's like just ultra feminist. Like I just love that the women are never the problem in that series. Like girls book, you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
Like if there's anything shady going down, it's not a woman that's doing it.
Yes. Here
So
for it.
yeah. So anyway, okay. Yeah.
No.
My friends some of my friends make fun of me because I talk about Courtney Milan so much. They have like a drinking game. Like if Debbie mentions Courtney Milan, take a shot. Like
I love that. I love it. Like that means it just means that clearly her work is doing something amazing. Because
yeah.
like I feel like, and like we get our little things that we're very excited about, and I don't know. That's just one of my favorite things in the world. When somebody's like just super excited about something, I'm just like, ugh, I want to know about it because if you're this excited about it, there's something there.
Awesome. Well, I'm sorry that I rambled on a little bit, but I really appreciate you taking the time. I think that it's really cool that you're building up this community and
You and thank you for being here. How can people find you?
yeah, so I have the same handle on all of my socials. I'm pretty much everywhere. It's Hey Debbie Gale. Debbie spelled Debigale, like the storm. And yeah, I'm on Twitter. I've been on Twitter, like I said, for more than a decade. And but lately I've been spending, more time on Instagram and TikTok. I am on Blue Sky, but I'm not over there as much. Yeah, I'm not on Threads because it stresses me out every time I open that app. I don't know what is what. Like immediately close it. It's very stressful to me. I don't know. It's just everybody seems upset. Like you would think that it wouldn't be more stressful than Twitter, but it is. Like Twitter is somehow like you get the crazy tweets, but then you get the humor. So it's like I can
Mhm.
roll with it. But Threads, it's like everybody something. It's just all on fire. I don't know what it is. So anyway, that's no shade if you love
My
that.
my threads is actually right now, for now, gives me old school Twitter vibes.
Oh, good. Okay, so maybe I just haven't curated I haven't built the timeline correctly.
But
That's
I've
probably
I've also heard a lot of people be like, it's a dumpster fire. So it seems real hit or miss. So like I don't like I'm having a good time, but I also have heard
okay.
multiple people say that it's not a good time for them. So I don't know what Threads has going on.
Well, and what you were saying earlier, I think that's the thing with socials is just find a space where you feel comfortable, that you feel like you
Yeah,
can connect with people, and if you don't feel comfortable, you
yeah,
don't need to be on that space. Like it's
for sure.
so